So, hello, welcome to this early engagement webinar focused on the future of employment support provision. We've been advertising this webinar to organizations within our provider network and our delivery partners and stakeholders and through us. And we're absolutely delighted to see so many of you have joined us today and share our interest in understanding what the future holds in the delivery of employment skills services. So I'm Graham Fitzjohn. I'm the head of strategic partnerships at AKG. I'll be taking us through this webinar with my able and wonderful co-presenters, Natasha Harvey, Business Development Director, and Anna Travers, Policy and Public Affairs Lead. So they'll introduce themselves to you as we go through the webinar. Without any further delay, let's move on. This is the agenda for the next hour, and over the next hour, we'll briefly introduce AKG to you if you don't know who we are. Anna will then take us through some of the key announcements from government in recent months, which will shape the future landscape for employment and skills services and what this means for the sector. So really providing some context for future employment support. We'll then say a little bit about the delivery of our Restart scheme that we've been delivering since June 2021. And then Natasha will take us through some details of what the recent pipeline notice from DWP has said on the future employment support. Natasha will be running through what the government recently announced in the pipeline notice for the replacement of the Restart scheme. We'll say a little bit about our delivery of the Restart as well. And then we'll also be talking about what we'll be doing over the next coming months around continuing to engage with the sector and with providers in the sector to discuss future employment support and to provide an update on what our plans will be over the coming months. We'll also have plenty of time for comments and questions through the course of this webinar. So, we look forward to discussing and speaking to you as we move on. But also finally, within the agenda, we've got some themed employer webinars lined up through the course of the next few months, and we'd like to very much invite you to sign up for those as well if you're interested. So we'll come on to those in a bit.
Hey, what is? I'll put this again. Slap out.
If you can make sure you're on mute, please. So, AKG UK, we are 4 businesses in the UK delivering complementary services for long-term unemployed people and people with complex barriers to employment. And we deliver those services at the intersection of needs. So across employment, learning and skills, health and well-being, and behavior change support. So we deliver some large-scale mainstream employment programs such as the DWP Restart scheme, as well as specially supported employment programs, including IPS in drug and alcohol treatment services, and more recently, Connect to Work. Our skills business delivers employability skills, including ESOL for work and a range of apprenticeships and diplomas covering roles within childcare, business services, and the housing sector. Our allied healthcare team of health coaches deliver tailored interventions to support individuals with disabilities and health conditions and other complex needs to have a better relationships with and understanding of their health condition and helping to remove it as a barrier to employment. And intuitive thinking skills, who are a lived experience recovery organization, where around 70% of their staff have lived experience of the barriers and needs their programs are designed to address. And they deliver a range of impactful behavior change interventions supporting people with complex needs, including those in the criminal justice system, including young people who are NEET and people going through addiction treatment programs and other groups. So you can see on this slide a bit of a snapshot of us as an organization. We have around 70 contracts, around 16,500 people on caseload, around 2,000 of our participants engaged in learning, and so on. And you can see on the slide there the geographical footprint that we have across the group. So we're going to move on to now a bit of context, I think, more than anything, so that understand the evolving employment support landscape and the range of government objectives and announcements that have been that come out recently over the last few months. So I'm going to hand over to Anna at this stage to take us through a set of slides that will give us some context and understanding of that evolving landscape. So over to you, Anna, please.
Thank you, Graham. So just by way of a very quick introduction, so my name is Anna Trevors. I'm a policy and public affairs specialist at a firm called DGA. We've been working with AKG, so with Aid, Natasha, Graham and the team for several years, and it's a pleasure to join you on this call today. So as Graham says, I will talk through briefly the sort of objectives and reform programme for the government and to take a view on that direction of travel and what this means for those of you on the call today. So if we move on to the next slide. So here we have sort of government's overall objectives across employment support, skills, health, welfare. No doubt a lot of these may be familiar to you, and we'll dive into some of these areas a bit further into the presentation. I think the main thing to state is that, the Labour came into government on a manifesto which set out plans, to reform employment support, to drive growth and opportunity, ensure that those that can work are supported to work, with a particular emphasis on the 18 to 21-year-olds who are not in work, employment or training, to support local areas to gain powers over adult education, skills, employment support, to devolve funding to local areas, to shape a more joined up work, health and skills offer for local people, to ensure that services are responsive to local employers and work in partnership with local services, to ensure that work pays and to deliver greater in-work security, and to work with devolved areas, so mayoralties, local authorities, to deliver a new approach to employment support, and one that partners effectively with devolved and local provision. So as you can see, from the objectives that we've pulled out here, that the government, the sort of objectives it set out in coming into office, it's actually maintained many of those manifesto pledges into objectives in government. And I think there are some sort of important themes across some of these objectives. One being a sort of focus on driving outcomes, so moving people into work and that being sustained employment, a greater integration of services to support local needs, and that drive towards greater collaboration and delivery at a local level. And we'll explore some of those themes over, I think, the course of this webinar. So if we could move on to the next slide. So here we've sort of captured key reforms that we'll sort of focus a bit more on today. And we've sort of put this into 3 distinct areas. So employment support services, looking at the Get Britain Working paper and some of the reviews that have also been prompted by that paper, looking at economic inactivity. We'll look at some of the welfare reforms, particularly the Pathway to Work Green Paper and the consultation, and then a little bit about education and skills. So if we move on to the next slide to look at employment support services. So I think many of you will be familiar with the Restart scheme, Connect to Work, both of which AKG are a kind of key provider of. So I think for the purpose of this section, I'll focus a bit more on the Get Britain working priorities and how this scheme supports government's broader priorities. So in 2024, the government published a Get Britain working white paper. This is a policy paper setting out early proposals to bring down levels of economic inactivity, to take the first steps to delivering a long-term ambition to get 80% employment rate. So at the time of publication, and the employment rate was at about 75%. So the emphasis here was on moving around sort of 2.2 million people into work. And from an economic perspective, the aim here was to obviously reduce welfare spending and also to increase tax revenues. And this paper was co-signed by ministers from the Treasury, the DWP, the Education Department, and the Health Department. And the paper took a sort of system-wide, very integrated approach to identifying steps to tackling economic activity, so looking across health, employment, local provision, and access to training and skills. The paper called out Connect to Work as a key. The paper called out Connect to Work as a key local programme to support local groups to have a role in delivering local support to address economic activity. It is worth pointing out that the Restart scheme, while somewhat predates the work of the Get Britain Working paper, Its focus on supporting those in long-term unemployment into work is certainly consistent and complementary with the steps the government has set out in this paper. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Get Britain Working paper has sort of spurred a closer sort of policy scrutiny and recommendations, which have then been picked up by a series of reviews. So the Milburn review is very much focused on understanding and designing recommendations towards NEETs, so those not in education, employment or training. And that's particularly focused on, the sort of 18 to 21-year-old bracket. At the moment, the review led by Alan Milburn is in progress, but he has, during the course of the review, been quite outspoken about reviewing all options for long-term reform. And we await the outcome of the review, which will publish interim findings in the summer, and then further findings later this year and into next year. In the meantime, the government has set out plans for a new deal for NEETs, which include measures such as a youth jobs grant, an expansion of the jobs guarantee, an apprenticeship incentive or greater apprenticeship incentives, and further reforms to the growth and skills levy to prioritise young apprentices and to give schools and college leavers more opportunities to build careers in sort of emerging industries. We also have the Mayfield Review, which reported last month, which set out a series of proposals for greater support across the employment life cycle. If we move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of welfare reforms, so the main priority I think to call out here is the Pathway to Work Green Paper. So this was a government consultation detailing reforms to disability benefits and work-related support. So while the Get Britain Working Paper sort of outlines a more comprehensive strategic reforms to employment, skills and health, acting as that sort of overarching vision, I think the Pathway to Work Green Paper and consultation is much more focused on specific reforms within the welfare system. However, I think it's fair to say that the outcomes of the consultation, which were published in October, acknowledge that welfare reforms can't be taken in isolation and that are very much part of a wider set of changes across health, skills, and a shift towards local provision. And the consultation made a number of recommendations across the spectrum of the welfare system, some of which the TIMS review, so a ministerial-led review focused on personal independence payments, but also a little bit wider, is also considering some of those recommendations. It's also worth calling out very briefly the Work Well pilot schemes, which ran until March, so last month. And these are a series of local schemes coordinated by integrated care boards to deliver a more joined up health and employment support services at a local level. And we understand that there's plans for a more national rollout of the scheme expected in the autumn over a three-year period. So this is focused on integrating health and employment support, particularly focused on preventing people leaving work due to health issues, but also supporting those return to work pathways. So on the kind of welfare reform side, the sort of big picture is that welfare reforms are much more focused around removing those barriers to people in work. If we move on to the next slide, please. So very briefly, just touching on a couple of other reforms. So I've already mentioned before an emphasis on the growth and skills levy. So this is much more looking at replacement options for the apprenticeship levy and looking at a more flexible and aligned, looking at support that's more flexible and aligned to employer needs, with a focus on supporting people into high quality in-work training. We also have SEND reforms. So the government set out proposals earlier this year to introduce reforms to SEND to improve outcomes for people with additional needs, with a greater emphasis on driving consistency, a more mainstream inclusion, and a smoother transition across different services. And overall, stepping back on the sort of education and skills priorities, the focus is much more on a demand-led and employment-focused reforms. So if we move on to the next slide. So here on this slide, we've set out, attempted to chart the timeline for some of these reforms coming in. And I think the main takeaway, I think, from this is that actually there's a lot of decisions still to be made around a lot of these schemes and programs. Things are still in consultation, reviews are still live. So there's a degree to which there will be decisions taken over this year and into next year about some of these key reforms. And then actually at the moment, we're coming to the end of a parliamentary session. So actually we're looking ahead to what the next parliamentary session will involve. And that may involve new legislation around SEND. It may involve new legislation around welfare, but this has yet to be confirmed. So I think the main takeaway is that actually there are a lot of decisions outstanding. Things are quite in flux, but actually a lot of these decisions may be taken within the next year to 18 months. So if we move on to the next slide. So what does this mean? Why is this of interest to everyone on this call? I think there are probably 4 kind of key areas to think about and to take away. The first is certainly that across the reforms that I've described and some of the objectives of government, there is that emphasis on a shift to local delivery. So certainly thinking about government's wider devolution reforms and devolving more funding and decision-making to local areas, there's certainly a drive towards strategic regional authorities playing a much bigger role in design and delivery of local provision. That includes commissioning decisions being increasingly made at a local level. Second is a focus on a more integrated system. So that is the join up between employment, health and skills services, but also thinking about that wider ecosystem as well. And really a focus on trying to remove the silos of provision across those areas. There's also a greater emphasis on co-design with local partners. So a greater expectation and stronger focus on collaboration with local authorities, local health systems, employers, but also local partners and providers. And finally, to drive opportunities for alignments and the chance to align services across employment, skills and health, but also thinking about how top-down delivery and bottom-up delivery is coordinated. I'll pause there and hand back to Graham. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Anna. I think that's really interesting to see the direction travel of government policy and the decisions that are being made. I think it's really helpful to bring it all together as well into that timeline slide. I think really understanding how much decision making still needs to be done over the coming sort of months. So it's really interesting. Thank you ever so much. So we'll now look at the future employment support, which is to replace the Restart scheme. So future employment support is the working title that government provided, or DWP provided, in the recent pipeline notice that was published on the 2nd of April. Before we get into that, and which Natasha will just take us through, just some high level numbers here, some metrics on our current delivery of the Restart scheme that we are able to share with you, with statistics published by DWP in October 2025 then. So it gives you an idea of the scale, the need and the impact that the program has had over the last 5 years or so. But we're not taking all the credit. 43% of our delivery of starts onto the program have been delivered and managed and supported through our delivery partner network. And they covered a large part of the geography that we covered to deliver the Restart scheme. You'll see some of the elements of need that we picked up from the participants that have joined the program. 27% of participants having no qualifications, 9% needing ESOL and basic skills support. Another kind of key need that we've identified as well through Restart is the level of support that people needed with their health and well-being. Something that perhaps wasn't expected at the outset of the program. And so our health coaches within AKG Health have delivered over 34,500 coaching sessions with our participants to help them manage their condition and to have a better understanding of their health, so that we're able to help lessen it as a barrier and enable people to move forward and to access and sustain employment. So that's been also other kind of the major needs that we've identified for people coming through the program. Excuse me. And certainly working in partnership has been absolutely core, front and center in terms of how we've delivered the Restart scheme. So we delivered the Restart scheme in the East Central contract package area, which includes 7 counties, but as you can see listed there, Lincolnshire, Leicestershire, Northamptonshire, Bedfordshire, North Buckinghamshire or Aylesbury Vale if you're a local, Staffordshire and Warwickshire. 43% of program is delivered through 10 cross-sector end-to-end delivery partners. And we've engaged and funded hundreds of local providers who make up our interventions library of wraparound support services. And these are support services our employment coaches access and to support their participants in their journey towards and into employment. Around £60 million of Restart funding has been provided to our end-to-end delivery partners. And somewhere in the region of £15 million of Restart funding has been used for purchasing specialist interventions for participants and to provide the support and services they need to access and sustain employment. So, like I say, it's a very much a program that's been delivered in partnership with stakeholders, with local authorities, with local providers, and we see that as certainly something that is clearly the grain of policy for future delivery of employment programs that government are looking at now and providing that information on. So over to Natasha now, who's going to take us through just a few details around the employment support or future employment support and the pipeline notice that was recently published. Over to you, Natasha.
Thanks, Graham. Hi, everybody. I'm Natasha. So I'm the Business Development Director at AKG in the UK. So I'm just going to talk about the future of employment support now. So I just thought we would cover off what we do know and also what we don't know, because there's quite a lot of that as well. So as Graham said, on the 2nd of April, DWP published their pipeline notice. A pipeline notice is basically an early signal from DWP that they plan to procure the service. In this case, we know it signals plans for a new employment support programme, which is likely the successor to Restart. The pipeline notice provides helpful information, but it leaves a lot of unknowns. So if we go and talk about what we do know at the moment, based on the fairly limited information that we've got, we know that DWP intends to procure this for out-of-work universal credit claimants. We know the programme will offer personalised, tailored support responsive to individual and local labour market needs, and we know it will be integrated within the local labour markets across England and Wales. In terms of expected support elements, we know it will include skills training, work experience, employer matching via job trials, job fairs and job brokerage, support with self-employment, intensive repeated help with applications and job interviews, support to manage health conditions in the workplace, support to address barriers to employment like travel and childcare, additional specialist support for complex needs, with examples in the notice given of ESOL and addiction support. Obviously, this mix is pretty similar to current Restart provision, and it fits really strongly within AKG and our delivery partner network's capabilities. So we are pretty excited about this opportunity. In terms of geography and governance, as mentioned, the programme is expected to cover England and Wales. DWP have said that they will co-design with the mayoral strategic authorities to ensure local relevance. We assume they are likely to procure centrally across England and then work collaboratively with mayoral areas and local labour markets. In Wales, we expect that they will procure directly via the Welsh Government. And finally, in terms of governance, the procurement notice does indicate a suitability for delivery by small and medium enterprises and the voluntary sector as well. In terms of timescales, much like current Restart, the service is expected to last for up to 5 years, with an indicative start date at the moment of February 2028, and with formal procurement expected to begin in late November. But to note that these timescales at this stage are just indicative. In terms of what is not known yet, can we go to the next slide, please, Graham? Thank you. there's a lot we don't know. So we don't know the final program name. It's just been badged as future employment support at the moment, but it could be anything. We don't know the total contract value or the value of an individual contract area. We don't know the geographical structure of the contracts. So it could mirror Restart's current 12 contract package areas, or it could be split up differently. We don't know, obviously, the detailed bid requirements or the questions, and we don't know exactly what will be expected in terms of the detailed specification of the delivery requirements. We don't know the performance measures, so it could be similar to Restart now with the job outcomes and threshold-based limits, or it could be including additional or entirely different measures. And while I think Anna and Graham have both picked up on the devolution element to this with the mayoral combined authorities, we don't know exactly how that could work in reality or to what extent it may happen. So yeah, in summary, I think there's a lot we do know, there's a lot we don't know, and we really hope that we will learn more via market engagement with DWP over the coming months. Thank you, Graham, and back to you.
Super. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so next step. So we see this as the first step. We're starting to engage with you as partners and providers. And we'd like to continue this approach of being engaged and transparent and willing to talk and willing to discuss this service with you over the coming months. So first and foremost, we intend to put out a light touch expression of interest, really inviting those who would like to explore potential partnership in the future with us to provide some details about your organization, where you deliver and the services you deliver. It's not going to be war and peace. I guarantee that. There would be no end date on that EOI because we still, time scales could be quite fluid, but we just want to start the conversation with you and by doing so, have that sort of light touch EOI out there. And we'll get that out in the coming week, and it will be sent out directly to everybody on this call and everybody that registered, but it'll also be on our website as well. I think the next stage as well, once we start to invite and receive your kind of initial interest, is to run some further webinars through every couple of months over the next sort of 6 months. So again, June, again in August and October, really to keep you up to date on DWP's procurement process and what they're sharing with the market as well. But also on what our plans are and how we're focusing in on our plans and what we intend to do and how we tend to move forward. We'd also be really interested in holding some regional forums as well and inviting providers to join us for some more kind of locally led discussions about future employment support, or maybe we'll have a name for the service by that point as well. I think when we get to the sharper end of the next sort of 6 months and we start to see that the tender, or when the tender is released, which is, I believe on the pipeline notice, the 26th of November, we would then have a more kind of detailed second stage EOI that would go out and inviting providers to complete that, which we would take a more formal sort of evaluation and scoring approach to, which will be based on the delivery model requirements that DWP have specified within the tender notice. And then we would go through the process of shortlisting, due diligence, and inviting organizations to come and work with us to co-design and inform the service that's required to ensure that we're capturing the wider expertise and specialisms of delivery partners within our propositions. So those will kind of be the next steps that we want to take. Like I say, is a bit of expression of interest, but formal kind of process that you're probably quite familiar with. But also, we want to engage and we want to talk. And those of you that know me, you'll know that my door's always open, and I'm always happy to chat to people. So, and you'll have my contact details. So, always happy to have sort of one-to-ones with providers as well, if you wanted to sort of just explore the art of the possible. So, yeah, okay. So we are now at plenty of time for comments and questions. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, so you're not staring at a green slide for for a while, and it's lovely to see everybody. So if you have any questions or anything in the chat maybe that we can respond to, then we'd be delighted to open the floor to you.
Hi guys, it's Jo here. There were a couple of questions in the chat about just making sure that they got the information. So I have directed people to the partnership portal. So I hope that was the right information for anyone showing any interest in partnering.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, there will be some more detail of that and the partnership portal in due course, but I appreciate that. Thank you. We've got a hand up, I think. Michelle?
Hi there. It's Michelle Allen from
Hi.
KPMG here. You might be a bit surprised to see me on the call. Perhaps not a name that you're expecting.
Michelle, thank you.
No, we work really extensively across DWP and various programs. We obviously have audit complex being an audit company as well. And I'm just wanted to get a very high level view of the funding mechanism. So this DWP funded, but is there any contractual relationship between this yourselves and the consortium and local authorities or ICBs at all, or is it all with DWP? But if you know.
We don't have no kind of contractual funding in that sense. No, I mean if you're referring to our existing Restart scheme delivery, that's all DWP funded. Yeah, I mean what I suppose we don't know is the extent to which any of this funding will be devolved to combined authorities or strategic authorities in the future. As we're seeing that there's a tempo to sort of local devolved commissioning at the moment, and there's real desire for government to accelerate that policy over the coming months and years. So, but at the moment, it's, as far as we understand, it's central DWP funding, and that's what would fund whatever would be replacing Restart's essentially commissioned national program. Like I said, any other decisions we don't know about at this stage.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thanks.
Is it Chris next? Chris, over to you.
Hi, Graham. Thanks. Really interesting presentation. I just wanted to pick on for the slide around this. Obviously, quite a lot, Natasha, that we still don't know. Sorry, I'm Chris from Futures, National Career Service Provider, East Midlands, East of England. We do some connector work in EMCA area as well. Do you have an inclination which way that geographic piece is going to go? Because obviously, they were substantially large contract package areas within Restart, not historically for what had gone before, but certainly for what's happened subsequently with a lot of more stuff, particularly connect work going through the new combined authority areas. Do you have a sense of which way it might go? And that's a question for you, Natasha, or you, Graham, in terms of what DWP might do in this space, especially tying back into that commitment around wanting to see local VCSEs and smaller SMEs be participating as well. So yeah, just a question about scale. Thanks.
Yeah, I can take that. Thanks, Chris. So to be really clear, we don't have any indication at all, as you said. So it would just be, hypothesizing really and best guesses. I think if I had to guess, I would say I think the contracts will still be of a fairly large scale. In terms of the VCSE SME element, last time around on Restart, the government set kind of targets they would like to have seen providers attain in terms of money flowing down, and I would expect similar to happen this time around. I guess the kind of big elephant in the room that we just don't know the extent of is the devolution element. So might some funding, much like Wales, go to some of the larger and more mature devolved authorities? That might be a possibility, but your guess is as good as mine.
Thanks. I just thought I'd probe a little bit more to see if I could get a little bit more of your.
I would love to have a crystal ball on that one.
But even just saying that you think it's more likely to be a retention of the larger CPA approach is useful. So thank you. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for the question, Chris. Richard.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank
Hi,
you
good
very
afternoon.
much indeed for a most interesting session so far. This may not be the correct forum to discuss kind of on a more local level with you guys, but my name's Richard Farrow and I've been involved with Tonic Health with regards to the delivery of Connect to Work in Lincolnshire. I wondered if any of you guys are directly involved in that particular tender process. If so, I wondered if there may be an opportunity, and I can see Natasha smiling here. You're probably familiar with what's going on at the moment. But I think it would be nice for providers who are showing an interest in having a discussion to help move this process forward, because it's become more than frustrating. And for anyone involved, I'm sure you'll understand what I'm saying in that respect. So please feel free to take my email address, and maybe at a more appropriate session, we can talk more specifically about good old Lincolnshire. It's not unusual for Lincolnshire to turn up very late for the party, but if we're not careful, the party's going to end before they even turn up, and that's a big worry, particularly for the service users in the area we represent. So if you feel there's some mileage in us getting together at another time, I would welcome that opportunity. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm a fellow Lincolnshireite, so I was delighted to see that a couple of the lots landed yesterday, but we haven't made any decisions on them yet. But we would very much welcome a conversation. So we will take your email address. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Richard.
Another Richard, yeah. My name is Richard Welford. I'm Chief Executive of MTIB. We're a supported employment provider and a supported business in Wales. And we currently deliver Restart under the subcontract. At the moment, we're going through, as probably yourselves, as Restart from July 26th for another year. In Wales, they're also commissioning an ESP program, which predicates on the unemployment aspect. Firstly, on the NEETs section of 16 to 24, effectively, and then there's a caveat for another two cohorts of six months unemployed and over 2 years unemployed, depending on whether it's being devolved or not. It was interesting to see from what you gathered from DWP that they're likely to devolve it, but the space and time to do that is relatively small, as well as the procuring at the same time. And the second question is, if they're going to start procuring in November, do we imagine that will coincide with the end of Restart in July 27, or the referrals from July 27?
Natasha, I'm going to give you that one.
In terms of the referrals and the timings,
Yeah,
I can take that. Yeah, so you're right. It's another unknown at the moment. We know that current Restart referrals end at the moment June 2027, and this contract is not at the moment scheduled to go live until February 2028. So there's 8 or so months there. There are a number of things that could happen, and we don't know which way DWP will go. Expect to get some more indicators hopefully very soon. So they could choose to extend Restart again for a period to avoid a gap. They could agree that a small gap is absolutely fine as the current caseloads kind of reduce, and then they start to bank up some referrals for a new program. I don't know exactly what they will do just yet.
thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mark.
Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. Thank you. Mine is a very straightforward question, Graham, if you will. And by definition of the fact that I'm actually on this call, can I assume that we are somehow within the partner portal? I've just got this kind of FOMO, fear of missing out. The fact that we got the invitation, does that mean that somehow our details are registered? Very simple and quick one.
So, Mark, if you got an email directly from me inviting you to attend, then yes, because I would have sent it out directly to all of the organizations that are registered in our provider network. If you received an email via Ursa, and engaged and registered via URSA, then perhaps not. But when we send out the first stage EOI, there was a question on it, which will say, are you registered on our provider network? Yes, no, or don't know. If you don't know, then we will check, and then we'll come back to you and let you know if you are registered. So either way, don't worry, you won't miss out.
That was blissfully simple, Graham. Thank you very much.
No worries at all. You're welcome. Joe.
Yes, I have my hands up because the chat is rife with questions. So I
Right.
thought
Thank
the
you,
time
Joe.
would let you know that there's some there. So shall I go through them? I have them in front of me. So
Wonderful,
hello,
Joe.
Matt.
Thank you.
No worries. Matt has asked, are the current referrals stopping June 27? If so, how will this fit with a potential replacement start of February 2028? Good question, Matt.
Very good question. And the answer is we don't know. And I think there's a lot of decisions that still need to be made. And so I could not possibly speak for DWP or government as to how they might address that. But clearly it's a concern that we would have, and it's a concern that other providers would have. So yes, but we don't know what the answer is at the moment. It's clearly a gap. Yes.
Thanks, Graham. There's another question is around who qualifies to be a training provider partner. Are you considering individuals or companies as providers?
Individuals in terms of sort
I
of
assume
a
small
specialist
company.
training or tutor.
I assume so, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the nature of what that training or provision might be. So if we're seeking a provider that can deliver to scale, then that might be difficult for one person to be able to deliver. But if they're thinking more about specialist provision that might be smaller cohorts of groups, then that might be fitting for the individual. I think it really depends on what the delivery model and what the requirements of this tender will ask for. And that is information we do not currently have. So we've, we deliberately kept, been very open and said, look, we don't know at the moment. We're not making any assumptions as to what DWP will commission for the future employment support. So the answer is probably both at this stage. And that's why any first stage EOI is deliberately light touch, because we don't want to ask for people to provide more information when we ourselves still don't know exactly what it is that we need. But we wanted to ensure that the conversations started early. So I'm happy to have a one-to-one discussion and talk it through. More than happy to do that.
Thanks, Graham. David's keen to know if there's any news on who has been awarded the pilot programmes for the youth guarantee schemes in East Midlands.
Is that the jobs guarantee? Which part? Yes. We don't know yet. I don't think. Tasha, do we know it? I don't think we do.
Not that I know.
You've heard.
No,
They
it was
meant to have
definitely
started, I
slightly
think.
delayed.
Yes. So no news yet. We don't know.
No news. Okay. Kathy, I'll just highlight your comment because you look like you're from the Autistic Girls Network, and you say you're a small charity wanting to help the members of your face-to-face groups as they age out of the groups at 18. Is there anywhere we can find out where we can get started as a tiny beginner in this niche? I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call that can reach out to you, Kathy. To be honest, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that, but a lot
Thank
of
you.
people
Yeah,
have put
that
their-
would be great. It's all a bit overwhelming when you haven't done any of this before.
Make sure your email address is put in the chat, Kathy, and then people can reach out to you. That would be
Okay, thank you.
a good thing. Next question is, how does the new national programme align with the transition of the Career Service and Job Centre Plus? Who wants to take that one? Any ideas?
Passion?
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer.
I might be
Hannah?
able to help as a National Career Service Prime in two
brilliant.
regions.
Does that create
Oh,
side
that's
growth?
be
Yeah,
great.
it's Chris. It doesn't basically. The jobs new service starts from October of this year, so well in advance of this commissioning exercise. 2P is currently being negotiated between National Career Service Primes and DWP, and all is on schedule. I'm sure it may slip a bit, but all is on schedule for it to happen this year. So it's a good year and a bit difference in terms of when it will actually be mobilised. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Chris.
Excellent. We're nearly there, and then I promise we'll come on to the next people that have got their hands up. Laura has asked, will AKG look to bid for CPAs geographically aligned to your current restart delivery, or will you look more widely at different CPAs? Ooh, good question.
I think we'll be looking more widely. That is the plan. We've not completely landed on which geographies at the moment. As you've seen from one of the earlier slides, we have quite a wide geographical footprint across the group. But yes, we're looking beyond not only our current CPA where we currently deliver, but we're looking beyond that as well.
Excellent. There's quite a lot more chatter in the chat. Craig, I can talking about working in partnership with AKG, and I think we've spoken previously. So, but in terms of questions around the actual content of the, I think that's probably it. But Craig will certainly get in touch, or Graham will get in touch with you regarding that. And yeah, so I will hand back.
Okay, Mark, is that a legacy hand you've got up there? If it is, or do you have another question?
I apologise, Graham. That is
That's
a
all right.
historic hand. Yes.
There's always a legacy hand somewhere. That's fine. No worries. Thank you. Piers.
Thanks, Graham, and the team for the brilliant updates. I'm Piers Neal. I'm Head of Policy at the Business Services Association. So this is incredibly timely from our perspective, because I've been in Westminster this morning with Minister Dana Johnson talking about all things employment support. We'll catch up after this. I just wanted to pick up. So one of the themes that came through in the meeting was that DWP are really keen to pick up the engagement and ensure that best practice is shared between particularly providers and those local areas who are maybe doing this for the first time. But it'd just be great to understand where you feel those gaps have been in the engagement to date, and including that sort of interplay between central, devolved and local, and then what more bodies like ours can do to sort of help plug those and bring this brilliant community that you've assembled today sort of together and involved in those conversations.
Good question, Piers. I might ask Anna to I don't know whether is this an area that you might be able to provide a little bit of feedback or insight on.
I'm probably not actually best placed to pick that up, because I think it's probably going to be views expressed from sort of first-hand experience of providers like AKG, but also within your network. So actually, I would encourage everyone on this call to think about how you might want to answer that question for Piers. I mean, I'd certainly be interested to understand what the likes of Darren Jones are thinking about in terms of employment support, because obviously that certainly speaks to a sense that, you know, there is a cross-government interest in this and a cross-government view about how to address these issues. So it's not just focused on how DWP is addressing this, but it's actually about joining up those departmental priorities.
Thank you, Anne. Tash, have you got any thoughts on that?
No, but I do think that DWP is listening and really engaging already. You know, I was on a meeting this morning with the Institute for Employment Studies, who were doing a big piece, I think, as part of the REACT partnership work on what future employment support should look like, what good looks like in commissioning and mobilisation and delivery, and that's all going back to the department, and that's feeding back on learning not just from historic kind of DWP Central Commission, but stuff like Connect to Work, which I'm sure many people on this call have got stories of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think it's a work in progress, honestly, on that one. And and one thing I think that's come through in a lot of the engagement I've seen from the market has been that Restart's already very good. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. What we have is an effective program. So I think the department is kind of almost looking for continuous improvement rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Thanks, Tash. I'm just conscious of time. We've got about 5 minutes to go. So if there's any questions in the chat that we haven't answered, then we'll take them away and we'll come back. And these slides and a recording of this webinar will be available afterwards to all those that have registered for the event. I'm just going to reshare the slides and pick up where we left off. So just bear with me for a moment. Okay, so hopefully you can see those slides again. Just to before we wrap up, I mentioned as well when we were going through the agenda that we have some employer webinars or a series of themed employer webinars lined up over the coming months, and you can see them on your screen now. Some of these webinars as well are kind of leaning into some of the government policy and objectives, particularly around skills progression and the future workforce and health and well-being at work. These are key objectives and themes that the government are interested in. These webinars are part of our social value commitments. They're available nationally. They're 1 hour, and like I said, would warmly welcome you to register for these webinars. There's a simple kind of MS Microsoft form that we've got as a registration form, and you can just pick the ones that you might be interested in joining, and it will be experienced people from across the group that will be leading these particular webinars. So this detail will go out on the slide deck after this event so that you can pick up these. They will also be on our website as well, so you'll be able to access and the detail and to be able to register if you wish to attend. Okay, so our contact details here on this last slide. It's kind of our group, our team kind of email address there. There's also a link to register for the partnership portal, which I think Joe said to put it in the chat. It'll also be on the slide, and we'll send that through. When we go out with the first stage EOI as well, the details of the partnership portal to be able to join, if you know that you're not part of it, will be on that as well, so you can register. It's a really simple form. It's just a who are you, where are you, and a few tick boxes, and it just kind of gets the ball rolling. And it's also within the partnership portals where we keep all of our slides and recordings of webinars and so on. So it's just kind of keeping all information in one place, so you've kind of got a single point of access, if you like. So but like I say, because you have all registered and attended the show today, we will be sending out the UI and other information directly to you at the end of the week. I think that's it. So unless there's any other questions, firstly, just say thank you very much for attending. We're overwhelmed with the amount of interest, and it's really lovely to see so many people join us for today's webinar. So thank you ever so much for joining us, and we'll re-engage and we'll stay engaged over the next few months, and you'll see a lot more of us. Thank you very much to Anna and to Natasha as well for your support. So
Thanks,
enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.